Well, that campaign is not yet governed. It may still stand, it may still look good. That's not finished work. In the Forge, the final step is not heating the metal.
You are listening to the Innovation Forge, the #1 podcast on adaptive enrollment management, exploring the data, marketing, and strategy that fuels higher education. Here's your host, David Dysart.
There's a version of Slate Personalization that looks powerful for about 2 weeks. You build the message, you add the liquid, you make population, you even add a condition for major, then one for student type, then one for territory, then one for event attendance, then one for financial aid, then one for the parent copy, then one for a special population someone remembered at that very last minute. The message sends, everyone's pleased. And then 3 months later, nobody wants to touch it. The logic's tangled, the population's unclear, the query has exports that nobody remembers. The content block has nested conditions, the subject line was approved for one audience, and is now being reused for another. The suppression logic lives in someone's head, the campaign calendar is in a spreadsheet that no longer matches Slate, and the person who built it says that they can probably fix it, but they need an hour to remember what they did. That's not personalization. That's a haunted house with merge fields. And this episode is about how to avoid that. The title is Governed Personalization. And the central question is how to make Slate communications more personalized without creating a system that becomes impossible to understand, test, or maintain. The question showed up across several Slate Summit sessions. Not always with the same language, but with that same practical problem underneath. Mike, Ross, they were from Hastings College, presented Mastering Flexible Drip Campaigns for Email and Print. Their session showed how a small team built a multi-channel nurture engine with more than 40 automated touchpoints across 3 high school classes, using populations, rules, timestamp logic, deliver, Slate print, one-tap surveys, and a restricted source chatbot. Joshua from Shippensburg University of Pennsylvania presented Solo Captain Big Impact, building multi-phase campaigns. That session focused on scaling from one-off emails into coordinated delivered campaigns when you don't have a huge production team. It covered population rules, timestamp methods, query templates, MJML, liquid, and bounded AI use. Christopher and Karen from Technolutions presented the Hitchhiker's Guide to Content Blocks and Liquid Markup. Now, that session gets into the craft layer. The reusable content, liquid syntax, content blocks, dictionary loops, testing, and even the division of labor between query logic and presentation logic. Matthew from the University of Chicago presented So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star? That session matters because it steps back from the message itself and argues that marketing in Slate starts with data quality, source definitions, portal purpose, channel discipline, and even reporting definitions. And Danielle and Daniel from Kent State University presented Slate-Powered Giving Tuesdays, multi-channel personalization for annual giving. Their example comes from advancement rather than admissions, but it's one of the strongest personalization patterns in the collection. A weighted score recommends the 3 most relevant funds out of 58, even more than 48, guys, 58. And the same recommendations coordinate email, portal, and caller talking points. Different context, same underlying issue. Personalization does not scale because someone writes clever conditional copy. Personalization scales when the institution builds governed, reusable decisions. That's the main argument today. Welcome to the Conference Insights Engine, presented by the Innovation Forge. I'm David Dysart, and this series is about turning Slate Summit material into interpretation and application. Today's episode is about communications, but not only copywriting, and that distinction matters so much. A lot of Slate communication work looks like writing from the outside, but underneath the message is a system. It's the populations, source definitions, content blocks, liquid, queries, channels, suppressions, templates, reporting tags, calendars, approvals, and everyone's favorite, the maintenance. If that system is strong, personalization can feel useful and coherent. If that system is weak, personalization becomes fragile very quickly. The mistake is thinking personalization means more freedom, more variations, more branches, more segments, more dynamic content, more ways to say the right thing to the right person. In practice, better personalization usually requires more constraints, not fewer. And that may sound counterintuitive, but it's the pattern that I see across these summit sessions. The best Slate communication systems are not creative free-for-alls. They are governed libraries. They have naming standards, audience definitions, reusable content blocks, population rules someone can inspect, suppression logic, QA records, fallback copy, owners, review dates, and even retirement rules. And that's what makes the creative work usable. Without constraints, personalization becomes a forge with sparks flying everywhere and no finished blade. The energy's real, the heat is real, but nobody can safely use the results. So let's define governed personalization. The governed personalization is the practice of using student or constituent data to adapt messages, channels, timing, or experience through the documented, reusable, testable rules. The key words here are the documented, reusable, testable, and rules. Not the most exciting words, though. If your personalization cannot be documented, it cannot be trusted. If it cannot be reused, it becomes production debt. If it cannot be tested, it will eventually embarrass you. If it does not have rules, it is not a system. It's improvisation. And improvisation has a place. Sometimes you need a one-off message. Sometimes a leadership request comes in late. Sometimes a cohort is unusual enough that a custom send is appropriate. But recruitment campaigns, yield campaigns, parent sequences, application completion drips, print and email nurture streams, and annual giving campaigns should not be reinvented every time. They should be built like tools. The Hastings College session is valuable because it shows campaign maturity as a long-term build, not overnight magic. Mike and Ross describe a small team environment that moved from the dream of automation into a multi-channel engine. The pieces are practical: marketing population, configurable joins rules, timestamp filters, email and print coordination, mobile-ready templates, one-tap surveys, and a restricted source chatbot. The most important operational lesson, at least in my view, is their use of population timestamp filters rather than relying on fixed days in population. That sounds technical, but the concept matters. If a campaign depends too rigidly on day 5, day 10, or day 15, the real-world interruptions can cause students to miss messages or receive them at the wrong time. Timestamp logic can make the campaign more tolerant of operational messiness. That is governed personalization. Not because the email's fancy, but because the timing logic is more durable. The Hastings session also connects email and print. That matters because many institutions treat print as separate from digital communications. But if the same campaign logic can coordinate email and print, the team can actually start thinking about a true message family instead of disconnected channel tactics. The one-tap survey example is also useful. It shows how a simple interaction can convert unknown or likely known interest into structured data that informs follow-up. I'd want to know even more about those downstream outcomes, and we're just seeing that the pattern is already so strong. Simple response mechanism can create better data, and better data can support more relevant communication. The session does not prove that every institution should copy the exact cadence. What it does provide is a strong operating pattern. Small teams can build durable campaign systems if they standardize populations, timing, naming, templates, and annual review. Joshua's Shippensburg session speaks to another common reality. Many Slate communication systems depend heavily on one person. That person may be the campaign architect, the query writer, template troubleshooter, liquid editor, QA lead, and the emergency repair shop. This is more common than teams like to admit. Solo Captain Big Impact shows a practical path from one-off emails to multi-phase campaigns. The session emphasizes starting with transactional and application completion messages, using populations and rules, deciding carefully between timestamp methods, relying on query templates, building responsive emails with MJML, and Liquid for personalization. One of the strongest pieces of advice is to start with messages that have clear operational value. Application completion messages are a good example. They have a defined audience, they have a clear purpose, they support movement through the funnel, they are easier to measure than vague, nurturing campaigns. They can be improved over time. And this is the right starting point. Do not begin governed personalization with your most complicated persona campaign. Begin with a message family where the audience, purpose, and next action are obvious. That's incomplete applications, missing materials, event follow-up, admitted student next steps, transfer checklist completion, parent onboarding, or just post-deposit transition tasks. The principle is the same. Start where the action is clear. Now, Shippensburg's use of MJML is also worth noting. The point is not that every shop must use it. The point is that design production needs a maintainable workflow. If responsive email design depends on one person hand coding every variation from scratch, well, that institution just has a succession problem. If the template library is reusable and understandable, the institution has an operating asset. The session also handles AI in the write register. The useful version of AI communications not just write the entire campaign and hope. It's bounded assistance. Improve existing copy, generate draft variants, help with structure, and supporting troubleshooting. But AI should not invent facts, define policy, or create unsupported claims. And a lot of this work also went into my own holograph codex, which is available as a custom GPT. I'll try to remember to add that to the episode description here. Because AI can help polish steel, it should not be allowed to forge institutional truth out of thin air. Now, the Technolution sessions on content blocks and Liquid gives us the craft layer underneath all of this. The core principle is simple and important. Queries should shape the data. Liquid should handle the presentation. That's one of the best technical principles in the communications set. If you push too much presentation logic into queries, your data layer becomes bloated and hard to reuse. If you push too much data shaping into Liquid, the message becomes hard to test and debug. The cleaner architecture here is to make the query return well-named, well-structured data, and then use Liquid in content blocks to render the correct message. This isn't just a technical preference. It is governance. And clean export names are governance. Fallback copy is governance. Testing records with different combinations of data is governance. Closing every tag is governance. Reducing 20 similar emails into one well-designed mailing can be governance, but only if that one mailing remains understandable. And the caveat matters so much. There's a false victory where a team says, we reduced 20 emails to one, but the one remaining email becomes a monster. It has so many conditions and nested branches that nobody can safely edit it. The goal is not always fewer or the fewest assets. The goal is appropriate abstraction. Sometimes one dynamic message is better. Sometimes just whittling it down to 5 simpler messages is better. The decision should depend on who can maintain it, how different the content really is, how easy it is to test, and how risky the variation is. Here's the practical rule I would use. Personalize with content blocks when the structure is shared and only pieces change. Use separate messages when the purpose, timing, audience, owner, or even the risk is meaningfully different. Don't just force everything into one dynamic message just to prove you can. A clever build is not automatically a good build. A gilded build? We can talk about that later. Matthews University of Chicago session adds a necessary warning here. Communication strategy starts before the message. The session frames Slate as a CRM, not a plug-and-play marketing tool. That matters because Slate will not automatically fix weak source data, overbuilt campaigns, vague portals, or inconsistent reporting definitions. The University of Chicago session emphasizes source quality, data handling, layered campaigns, selective channels, portal purpose, and reporting through sources, origin sources, UTM parameters, referrers, and return analysis. And this is the part so many teams want to skip. They want to start with the campaign. but the campaign is only as good as the audience and source definitions underneath it. If purchased list quality is weak, importing everyone as full inquiries may and likely will create noise. If source definitions are inconsistent, the team cannot tell what worked. If UTM governance is sloppy, attribution becomes folklore. If a portal duplicates the native functionality without a clear student purpose, it becomes one more thing to maintain. If SMS is used because it feels urgent rather than because the content deserves that channel, the channel gets burned. The University of Chicago session gives us a broader standard. Before you personalize, decide whether the data deserves to drive personalization. Not every data source deserves the same treatment. High confidence student-submitted interest data may support tailored content. A low-quality purchase list may support a light invitation to self-identify. An explicit RFI selection, well, that might support academic or interest-based content blocks. A vague referrer may support reporting, but not direct personalization. Parent behavior may support parent messaging, but should not automatically be treated as student intent. The source determines the confidence, and the confidence determines the allowed action, and the allowed action determines the message. This is where communications governance and signal governance meet. The Kent State Giving Tuesday session gives us one of the strongest examples of multi-channel personalization. Even though the context is advancement, Slate admissions and enrollment teams should study this pattern. Kent State had 58 possible funds and wanted to recommend the 3 most relevant funds for each constituent. They used structured campaign data, affinity signals, prior giving, engagement, academic connections, weighted scoring, content blocks, liquid, and a custom portal with URL parameters and caller talking points. That's useful because it shows personalization across the channels. The email says one thing, the portal reinforces it, the caller script supports it, and the same ranked recommendations coordinate the experience. And that's where personalization becomes more than a mail merge. It becomes experience architecture. For admissions, well, the equivalent pattern might be an interest shaping the email, the portal showing related next steps, the counselor seeing the same context, the event invitation aligning with the student's interest, and parent message supporting the decision without pretending the parent is the student. This is a mature pattern. Let's turn all of this into a practical framework. I would use a communications governance map for every major campaign. The map does not need to be elaborate. It needs to answer a few basic questions clearly. Who's eligible for the campaign? Why are they included? What is the campaign supposed to do? What message family does it belong to? Which channels are involved? Which fields or behaviors may change the content? Which templates, content blocks, snippets, images, forms, portals, print pieces, or SMS languages were used? Who should be suppressed? What happens if data is blank? Which test records need review? What outcomes matter? And who owns the maintenance? That's the map. If that sounds like a lot, and it's because it is, but it's less work than cleaning up 2 years of unmanaged campaigns. That's the trade-off teams need to understand. Governance feels slow at the beginning. It saves time later. Copy-paste feels fast at the beginning, but it compounds debt later. A strong governance map prevents common failures. It stops teams from personalizing with low-confidence data. It prevents 3 offices from messaging the same student about related topics on the same day. It makes fallback copy visible. It forces the team to test blank fields and edge cases. It gives future staff a way to understand why the campaign exists. Most importantly, it makes personalization explainable. If a student receives a tailored message, the institution should be able to explain why that message made sense without sounding strange. If staff cannot explain the logic internally, the student-facing experience is probably not ready. There are a few tensions here that require judgment. The first is one campaign versus many campaigns. Teams often ask whether they should build one dynamic deliver mailing or several simpler mailings. Well, there's just no universal answer to that. One dynamic mailing is better when the audience shares the same purpose, the timing is the same, the structure is mostly the same, and only a few sections vary. and the team can test all major combinations. Separate mailings are better when purpose differs, the timing differs, the owner differs, the tone changes substantially, the risk is higher, or the liquid become too nested to maintain. The right answer is not reduced mailings or segment everything. The right answer is the clearest, safest, and most maintainable system. The second tension is automation versus human review. Hastings and Shippensburg both show small teams using automation at scale, and that is necessary. But not every message deserves the same level of automation. An application completion reminder can often be automated. A generic event reminder can often be automated. A simple interest-based nature message can often be automated. But a financial aid concern message, a high-priority counselor intervention, a parent message based on student behavior, or an AI-assisted campaign may need stronger review. The more sensitive or even consequential the message, the stronger the review should be. The third tension is creativity versus consistency. Communications teams should want fresh, compelling content. Boring messaging is not a virtue, but if every message is freshly invented, the system becomes inconsistent. Tone shifts, claims drift, deadlines get phased and phrased differently, calls to action multiply, accessibility gets missed, reporting tags change. Governed personalization does not eliminate creativity. It gives creativity a safe frame. Think of it like a blacksmith's jig. The jig does not make the blade for you. It holds the work steady so skill can be applied consistently. A content block library is a jig. Naming convention is a jig. A QA checklist, a jig. A campaign map is a jig. They make the craft repeatable. AI belongs inside that same discipline. If AI helps rewrite a paragraph, it still needs source truth. If it helps build campaign variants, those variants still need approval. If it supports a chatbot, the source base must be restricted and reviewed. If it creates code or liquid, it must be tested. If it summarizes student behavior, the resulting message still needs an action policy. AI can accelerate governed work, but it shouldn't replace governance. For communications, I would separate AI use into 3 practical categories. Some uses are low risk, like rewriting approved content for clarity, producing draft variants from verified source materials, suggesting subject lines, explaining liquid text, syntax, troubleshooting HTML, or summarizing campaign documents. Some uses require review, generating new campaign copy, creating audience-specific claims, modifying liquid HTML, producing chatbot knowledge-based content, or even recommending segmentation logic. And some uses should require formal approval. Things like institutional facts, creating financial aid or policy language, inferring sensitive student motivations, generating unsupported outcome claims, or sending directly to students without human review. The standard is not anti-AI, it's pro-quality. And measurement is the other place where governance has to mature. A campaign should not be judged only by opens and clicks. Opens and clicks are diagnostic and unreliable. They are not the final goal. For application completion, measure completion. For event campaigns, measure registration and attendance. For yield campaigns, measure meaningful next steps, not just engagement. For source campaigns, measure inquiry quality, application rates, admit rate, deposit rate, and cost per outcome where possible. For print, measure whether the combined channel strategy improves downstream behavior. For personalization, measure whether the tailored version outperforms a reasonable baseline. For one-tap surveys, measure not only response, but what happened after response. For chatbots, measure answer accuracy, escalation rate, usage, and staff impact. This matters because communication governance should serve strategy, not just produce elegance. A beautifully governed campaign that does not move the right outcome still needs revision. A messy campaign that performs well may still need governance before it can be safely scaled. Both substance and structure matters. If I were turning these summit sessions into a staff exercise, I would give the team one campaign scenario: an admitted student yield campaign, an application completion campaign, a parent support sequence, or maybe an event follow-up series. Then I would ask them to build the governance map. Not the copy first, the map first. Who's the audience? What's the purpose? What data is trusted enough to personalize? What content changes? What stays fixed? What gets suppressed? What test records are needed? What outcomes matter? Who owns it after launch? Then I would give them sample records, a student with strong academic interest, a student with financial aid engagement, a student with parent-only engagement, a student with high portal activity, and maybe a deposited student missing onboarding items. Should each person receive the same message? If not, what changes? Does the content change, or only the channel? Does the owner change? Does the student get suppressed? Is a portal change better than an email? Does the signal justify action, or only awareness? This exercise teaches personalization as decision design, not just message editing. It also exposes weak definitions. If nobody knows what financial aid engagement means, do not personalize on it yet. If nobody knows whether a portal login is student or parent, be careful. If nobody knows whether a source is reliable, don't overuse it. If nobody owns parent communications, define ownership before building a campaign. The training exercise becomes a governance audit. And that's the kind of practical lesson running through these sessions. Communications work is becoming systems work. Population architecture is communications work. Source governance, that's communications work. Content blocks are communications work. Liquid testing is communications work. UTM definitions are communications work. The portal purpose, that's communications work. AI source restrictions is communications work. Print coordination is communications work. Caller scripts are communications work. Even reporting definitions are communications work. If you only treat communications as copywriting, you miss the machinery that determines whether the communication is accurate, timely, measurable, and maintainable. And that's why communications governance belongs in the Slate roadmap, not just the marketing calendar. Many teams are still stuck at the copy-paste stage. They duplicate last year's campaign, update dates, change a few links, and hope nothing breaks. Others are stuck at that one-person knowledge stage, where one person knows why a population exists, why a liquid block is written that way, or why a suppression was added. Some are stuck at the more segments means better personalization stage, creating tiny audiences without asking whether the message is meaningfully different. Others build campaigns first and figure out measurement later. The summit sessions offer ways out of those traps. Hastings shows steady campaign refinement and flexible timing. Shippensburg shows a small team path to multi-phase campaigns. Technolutions shows reusable content and liquid patterns. University of Chicago shows that source and reporting discipline, and Kent State shows multi-channel personalization built around a structured recommendation model. Together, they all point towards governed personalization. Personalization is often sold as a way to make communications feel more human. That can be true, but poorly governed personalization does the opposite. It exposes the machinery. It sends the wrong detail. It references something the student does not recognize. It repeats itself. It contradicts another message. It makes the institution look less attentive, not more. Governed personalization is different. It uses data with restraint. It reuses approved content. It respects source confidence. It makes timing visible. It protects students from noise. It gives a shared operating model. It can be tested. It can be explained. It can survive the person who built it. Imagine that. But that's the standard. If you're working through the summit materials, I would study the Hastings and Shippensburg sessions together. If you're building recruitment campaigns on a small team, add the Technolutions content blocks and liquid session. If you need the reusable technical later, add the University of Chicago session if your source definitions, portals, and attribution needs discipline. And add the Kent State Giving Tuesday session if you want to see personalization coordinated across email, web, and human outreach. And if you want one practical action this week, pick one important campaign and write that governance map. If you cannot define the audience, purpose, personalization inputs, suppressions, QA plan, owner, and success measures, well, that campaign is not yet governed. It may still stand. It may still look good. But it's not finished work. In the forge, the final step is not heating the metal. It's shaping, checking, tempering, and making sure the tool will hold under pressure. Slate communications need the same discipline. Thanks for listening to the Conference Insight Engine presented by the Innovation Forge. Go find one campaign that has become too clever to maintain and turn it back into a tool. If you enjoyed today's episode, please grow the guild by rating and reviewing the Innovation Forge podcast or sharing it with a colleague who needs to hear about these creative crossovers in education. The best review or comment every month will get an ebook of my book, of course. Particularly great ones will also be featured on future episodes. Thank you so much for joining me in the workshop today. Remember to strike true, and let's forge something extraordinary together.
Subject line. You can split the copy 3 more times. You can chase the perfect thing to say till nobody knows why it works that way. There was a message that felt like gold. Every little branch did what it was told. Major student type, 8 event, a perfect send, and the meaning went. 3 months later, nobody knew which part was old and which part was true. One more condition, one more field, one more broken thing concealed. So not the rule before the rhyme. Name the owner, test the line. If the signal's weak, let it wait. The good intent still needs a gate. Govern personalization. Make it clear enough to trust. Every block has a reason. Every send is built on us. Rules and tests and suppression. Fallback copy in the right. Govern personalization. Make the message earn the right. Query shape the data clean. Liquid paints what should be seen. Content blocks that know their place. Save the team from copy paste. The student clicks, a parent reads. A portal shows the next best need. One score can guide the channel through. If the source is strong and the action's true. So not the rule before the rhyme. Name the owner, test the line. If the signal's weak, let it wait. Good intent still needs a gate. Govern personalization. Make it clear enough to trust. Every block has a reason. Every send is built on us. Rules and tests and suppression. Fallback copy in the light. Govern personalization. Make the message earn the right. One big email can become a maze. 5 small sends can lose the thread. Build the thing the team can change. Build the thing they understand. Source to signal. Signal to choice. Choice to channel. Channel to voice. If we cannot say why it was sent, then it is dead. Trash stop as intent.